Well, the truth I know is that within you and within me and within all of us, there is a real self that's living in a real God, a real goodness, a real atmosphere of goodness and love. And they are one. And that is the secret of life. That is that bridge over troubled waters. When we can find that connection between ourself and the greater good, that there is no separation, that power for good, as Ernest Holmes said, there is a power for good in the universe that's greater than we are. And what can we do with it? We can use it all the time, anytime. It's there for us. And that is the secret of life. That's the secret of life that every experience, every lesson is trying to teach us. That we're one with this power for good. That there's an answer, an inspiration in everything always. And here we are, Palm Sunday. And I don't know what your relationship with Jesus and the Easter story and the Christmas story is. I don't know if you believe the Bible is a historical journal, or if it's all symbolic and metaphysical, or if it's a combination of the two. It doesn't matter. These stories, like Easter and Christmas, that have lasted for thousands and thousands of years, are messages for us about our own internal journey of an awakening, of transformation, of becoming more so we can live our best life. I know when when Ernest Holmes spoke of Jesus, he did not call him the Savior, because what we know is there's only one person that can save us, and that's us. But he did call Jesus the way shower, the great teacher, the great physician, the illumined one, the blessed one. He looked at him as the mystic who really got it all, who understood life. He really knew it. He got that golden key that opened the door to something so much more. So here we are at Palm Sunday, it marks the beginning of the Holy Week, where Jesus, being this great teacher that's teaching us about the paradox of life, how we are to take this beautiful spiritual insight that we're learning and growing and getting and combine it with worldly experiences. How do we do that? So he rides into Jerusalem for Passover week. He rides in, triumphant, glorious entry on a donkey. The spiritual and the physical, bringing them together. And people are shouting, Hosanna in the highest, Savior in the highest. And they're throwing cloaks and palm leaves on the road as he comes in, because they're looking to him to rescue them, to save them. Yet that was very short-sighted for many of these people, because at the end of the week, many of these people were the same ones saying, crucify him. Crucify him. Because they wanted someone to come in and overturn the Roman rule. And it shows us in life how delicate things are, how quickly things can change. So he comes in, and then he goes into the temple, the place of worship, and he expels the money changers, the merchants, takes the money out of the temple. And in a state, he says, this isn't the place for this. Again, separating a place for the spiritual worship and to do your work outside of that. And then, of course, there's the dinner. I don't think I'm too awake today. You know that dinner, that feast they had? There's that thing, bringing everybody all together. Okay. We teach forgiveness, okay? Humanity, forgiving, bringing the humus to the physical, it's all part of the package. But all of these things are teaching us about how we're to live in this world, to be able to be human and still expand into our greatest yet to be. You know what keeps us from being fully authentic? I said last week what I love so much. I've given it all to you. I've given you freedom to be authentic, individualized, unique. I've given you that. We get to be that. What keeps us for living fully? Ernest Holmes said, greater than the fear of death is the fear of being fully alive. And isn't that true? We're afraid. We're born unique, original, authentic, and yet we're afraid to live because we're afraid of being criticized. We're afraid of unkindness. We're afraid of physical suffering. We're afraid of punishment. We're afraid of not being good enough. We're blah, 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 on and on, when what we're here to do is simply be our best selves. Do you know, I was listening, I'm not sure the fellow's name. I read an article and then I listened to a little TED Talk he did. He was a Harvard researcher. And he said the millennials today, when asked, let's just say you want to live your best life in the future, where's your focus going to be? And 80% of the millennials say, I want to be rich. And 50% say, I want to be famous. I want to be rich and famous. Yet they've done an 80-year study at Harvard about the lessons of life and the lessons in happiness. And they have a much different take that I'm going to tell you in a minute. The same question was asked to an older couple that was really talking about some deep things about preparing more for their resurrection into the other life, into the next life. And the husband said to his wife, well, what are you going to do if I happen to die first? And she said, well, I think I'll get a house with a couple of single women, maybe some widows, maybe the 3 or 4 of us. That's what I think I'll do. I think that'll bring me peace and happiness. And she said, what are you going to do if I happen to die first? And he said, that's a really good idea. We all have different ideas in life. But this Harvard study was saying that it was almost 80 years ago, so the research was done only on men because it was an all-male school at the time. And they took, a certain almost 275 men from the sophomore class, and they did a study, and they wanted to study them and asked if they could study them throughout their life to see what brought them happiness and joy. And of those men, they also had another group that came from a very, very poor, the poorest families in Boston. And they had a group, so they had 2 study groups. And of these groups, there's only about, I think, 19 or 20 left living today in their 90s. But of this group, many became successful businessmen, many became lawyers, doctors. One even became president of the United States, John F. Kennedy. And some became alcoholics, some became schizophrenic. Yet they stayed with the study, and as I said, there's about 19 left now, and they've not just studied these men, but not too long ago, they asked if they could study their wives and partners too, finally, and the women said, it's about time, but, and their children and their children. So they've studied these families, and what they've come up with, yes, a lot became rich and successful, but what truly brought happiness was close relationships. Close relationships brought happiness and good health. Not only longevity, brain health, happiness, peace. And it's not just relationships, and I felt extremely relieved. It's not just relationships that are smooth all the time. Oh my goodness. They can have squabbles and problems and disagreements, but it's the relationships you can depend on. The people that had groups of people, family, friends, communities, where you could depend on each other, these people were the happiest, lived the longest, healthiest lives, when you could have people you could depend on. And I think, it made me think when we were talking about Jesus this week and his life as a way shower and a great teacher, he taught there 2 commandments. Just 2. Love God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, your strength. Love God completely. And love your neighbor as yourself. He got it. He got it, and he was here to teach us that. So how do we get to that place where we can love so deeply and completely? Because, if we realize that life is like a mirror, if we look in a physical mirror, we see a physical reflection of ourselves. But we have these currents of thought energy, and our thoughts, powered by our feelings and our beliefs, go out into this atmosphere of potential energy, and they reflect back to us what we think into it. So when it is done unto you as you believe, that's what happens to us. So if you and I are living in this fear of being alive, what are we getting back? More stuff to be fearful about. More stuff that we can be afraid of. Yet if you and I realize right now that in every situation, instead of being afraid of it, we have creative thoughts that hold solutions and answers. Yet to be tapped in to that place within us, that real self that holds that connection to the real power, the real God, that's right here. You and I need to be in the flow of that good. If we took, thank goodness we can turn these off. If we took a light bulb, this is just a little flicker stick, right? Until we turn on the power, until we hook it up to a current, a juice, a power that gives it the energy to be the light. You and I have that same power, but we gotta get turned on. We gotta plug ourselves into something more than that. And I believe if you and I take this week with, no week offers us a smooth sailing ride the whole time, and decide that we're going to look for that which is good and right and holy. All we have to do is look for things we can love. Because the greatest lesson is that love heals. And if you think about it, Jesus wore a beautiful robe, a tunic, a cloak that had no seams at all. It was one piece of cloth, a wholeness. And when the woman touched his coat, just the bottom of it, she was healed. Because wholeness heals. If we can realize no matter, we are perfectly imperfect. We're whole and complete exactly as we are. Love heals. It's the healing agent in the world. And when you and I express our love as kindness, kindness heals also. I want to tell you another story. Similar to the story of the study that was been done for almost 80 years. This is a study that started back in 1988. And it's a story of Father Greg Boyle. And he was an LA kid. And I'll tell you, in the late 80s, there was the gang violence in LA was at its height. And this LA kid developed himself to be a Catholic Jesuit priest. And he started working with the gangs in LA to help them turn their lives around. And he did so with kindness. He did so. He has the greatest right now. It's called the Homeboy Industry, and it's the largest rehabilitation reentry project in the world, helping gang members change their life to start loving themselves. And it really starts with kindness. And there was an article in the Los Angeles Times sharing a recent story that Father Boyle was sharing. And every morning at the Homeboy Industry, they have a morning ritual, which is a circle they get into to share and talk and tell stories, because he likes to heal through stories. And he was telling the story of a young homie that got recently released from lockup and sent to El Salvador, deported to El Salvador, which was totally a foreign country to him. He barely knew the language, didn't know the country, and he started heading back north. And when he was heading back north, he got mugged and robbed and stripped naked, and he was just left there in the street. And strangers from a household in Mexico took him in. And they gave him boxers and socks and shoes and pants and a shirt, and they fed him. But he said he was fed the most by their reverent kindness, that complete strangers would take him in and help him. In that moment, he had a great awakening. His life turned around. He was so changed by that act of kindness, he took a vow to share that same kindness in the world. And he said the power of that one thought, that he could bring kindness back to where he came from and help other people learn what it feels like when you can depend on somebody, when somebody cares enough about you to care for you. He would use that power to get back home. Father Boyle was sharing this in his circle in the morning, and he said, I want you this week to appreciate others. Because when we start appreciate and being kind to others, we start cherishing and appreciating life. And a joy comes to us unlike anything we've ever experienced. That's what I want for us. That same touching of joy, of people we can love and depend on, and people that can love and depend on us. Let's just join together right now in a prayer. Let's just open ourselves to that power and presence of good, of God, of love, that real goodness, that atmosphere of sweetness and tenderness and joy that we are part of. Just allow yourself in this moment to open to that and know that that power for good is there for us, that power for love. And as we tap into it, we feel a peace that certainly passes any understanding we can know. It's just this peace we feel, this kindness we feel, this love we feel that carries us into life, wanting to be the best version of ourselves, wanting us to be the ones to carry the joy and the kindness into life, that we can uplift the consciousness of life right here. And no matter what comes our way, no matter what experience, what problem comes our way, it's a knowing from deep, deep, deep inside our connection with God and love and goodness and peace and power right now, that we know we have an inspired, intuitive knowing of a creative thought that's bigger than any problem, that's bigger than any situation. And as we prepare ourselves during this holy week, that we can look at life as an integrated tapestry of experiences that are guiding us to transform, that inner journey to be resurrected in a new expression of ourselves that is absolutely ignited with joy and peace and kindness, that we have that power right here and right now, knowing that as we ignite that in ourselves, it is so easy to see and embrace that kindness and love in others. Just owning that for ourselves right here in this moment, knowing that it is the truth that has been spoken about each and every one of us as unique and divine expression of God's inherent goodness, that we enter into this week higher, brighter, lighter. We enter into this week as a solution, a possibility, that we are the ones together that can carry life to this world we know can happen, a world that works for everyone, for all, right here and now. Taking a nice deep breath and letting this truth just integrate into our entire mind, our body, our spirit, that oneness as we integrate with that atmosphere of love and goodness that we call God. We just let it go. We let it be. And together we say, and so it is. I just wish and know for you that you follow the light of love this week, that you are better, greater, grander than you've ever known yourself to be, because that's what I know about you. God bless you all. Thank you.